These cities were built in dangerous locations. What the hell were people thinking? Today we'll be taking a look at 15 cities built on the edge. Number 15. Yanjin, China. Often known as the world's narrowest metropolis, this city in Yanjin County is precariously built alongside the Nanxi River and nestled between the rugged mountains of the Yunnan province. And although not every entry on this list takes the idea of cities built on the edge so literally, this is certainly a great one to start with. As you can see from the air, this place basically looks like a sandwich, with either side of the city as slices of bread and the river as the filling. Measuring about 30 meters at its narrowest point and 300 meters at its broadest. Perhaps the most surprising thing about this city, given its location, is that there aren't a whole lot of bridges in the area. Each of the homes are built on pillars to protect when the water level rises due to flooding. And it's nice to see that developers took this precaution. But even so, that has to be one of the most worrying places to live in the world. Flooding aside, the potential for your house to suddenly fall down a cliff edge is definitely a downside. Not only that, but because of its inaccessible location, the town is unable to flourish economically. Well, on the other hand, many of the citizens who live there say they would never even consider living anywhere else. So what do I know? Number 14. Hanging Houses of Cuenca, Spain. Located in Cuenca, in Spain, the Casas Colgadas, or hung houses, is a complex of residential buildings left over from the days when homes of this variety were frequent along the eastern border of this ancient city, located near the ravine of the river Huecar. As you can see, there are only a few of them now remaining, which have over the years been used as homes, council homes, a restaurant, and even the Spanish Abstract Art Museum. The most well-known of the remaining buildings is a group of 3 with wooden balconies, but the mysterious thing about these homes is that their original purpose remains uncertain. Although we know they existed as far back as the 15th century, they've been refurbished many times, with the most recent taking place in the 1920s. The enigmatic nature of this tiny village makes it an incredibly appealing visit, even if its pretty precarious location does not. Number 13. Hilo, Hawaii. From places that were literally built on the edge and therefore in danger of falling into something, we move on to a place built very near to something where the main danger is what flows out of it. In other words, the largest volcano on Earth. You see, Hilo is the closest city to the Mauna Loa volcano, which produces lava at a higher rate than any other volcano in Hawaii, and has a variety of vents and rifts which are worryingly close to the city. In fact, twice in 1885, lava covered land that is now within the city limits, and as recently as 1985, a lava flow came within 4.5 miles of the town. One saving grace of living next to the world's biggest volcano, though, is that if it does start trying to cover your home and those of all your neighbors in molten lava, the flow itself is notoriously slow, so you'll have plenty of time to evacuate. Although that's probably not something you'll be thankful for if you're leaving your home and possessions behind for almost certain destruction. Number 12. Jakarta, Indonesia. So yeah, living in a town that could fall off the edge of a cliff is pretty worrying, as is living on the edge of an active volcano. But one thing that's probably just as worrying as both of those possibilities is living somewhere that's quite literally sinking. Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, is the fastest sinking city in the world and seems to be being consumed by the water at a rate of 6.5 inches per year. In the last 10 years alone, the region has sunk 2.5 meters, with almost half of the city now below sea level. And if that's not enough for you to cancel your plans to buy a holiday home in Jakarta, then maybe consider that according to researchers, 95% of North Jakarta will eventually be submerged. Okay, the rising sea level is a problem, and a pretty big one to be fair, but it's not helped by the fact that a lot of the population pump their own groundwater from underground aquifers, and this change in pressure causes the land to sink even further. That's scary. Number 11. The village of Craco, Italy. Some cities, towns, and villages are so dangerous that even families who live there for generations eventually take a look around and let out a loud "nope" and decide to move on to greener pastures. And the village of Craco is one such place. In other words, it's basically a ghost town. Nobody lives here anymore, and you'd think by looking at the place that it had been uninhabited for hundreds of years, but no. Considering the village now looks like a series of ruins, it was abandoned relatively recently, towards the end of the 20th century. This was mainly due to a landslide, which makes perfect sense, because if you lived in this location, then landslides are probably right at the top of your list of concerns. Reportedly due to faulty pipework, which eventually failed, this landslide resulted in every single Craco local moving out, leading to its current status as a tourist attraction and location for movies and TV shows. Number 10. Naples, Italy. Alright, we're back in Italy again. You'd think that a city in such close proximity to the legendary Pompeii would be pretty secure in the knowledge that they've managed to survive the eruption Pompeii didn't, and it's still standing here lava-free many centuries later. Well, you'd be wrong, however, because according to the president of the European Volcanological Society, Henry Gaudreau, the Napoli area is probably the most threatened modern urban area. Naples, you see, is not only close to the infamous Mount Vesuvius volcano, but also sits near the supervolcano Campi Flegrei Fields. When you combine this knowledge with the fact that a lava flow could reach the city in 6 minutes, and that Naples' small cobblestone streets would take up to 72 hours to evacuate, you get the impression that residents certainly have plenty to worry about, even compared to their ash-covered neighbors. Number 9. Goma, Democratic Republic of Congo. The city of Goma, like a few of the entries on this list, is located only a short distance from a volcano. Only this volcano happens to be 11,382 feet tall and features the largest lava lake on Earth. Located in the Democratic Republic of Congo on the eastern shore of Lake Kivu, Goma is a mere 12 miles from Mount Nyiragongo, and this is one of those volcanoes that's erupted decades or even centuries ago and's been suspiciously quiet ever since. This thing was responsible for almost destroying Goma when in 2002 an 1,100-yard wide and 6.5-foot deep flow spilled over the edge of the lava lake and ran through the city, destroying more than 4,500 buildings and the local airport. On the other hand, the residents of Goma had always been on high alert for just such an eventuality, so were able to evacuate, only suffering 147 casualties due to carbon dioxide inhalation. But needless to say, residents have been sleeping with one eye open ever since. Number 8. Nebida La Veria, Italy. Here's another semi-abandoned village which couldn't have been built in a more precarious location even if they tried. Nebida La Veria is a village consisting mainly of workers from the old lead and zinc mines of Nebida, with houses built around a square, a workers' recreation center, a health clinic, administration offices, and a church. And in 1910, around 3,000 people lived in the village, and a third of these were miners, although today it's becoming something of a ghost town with about 100 residents. The mine, you see, reached its peak productivity in the 1930s, but due to the great mining crisis of the 1970s, it soon went downhill, and the town went downhill with it. Well, not literally, of course. If you live in this place, the words like downhill probably make you incredibly nervous, as it looks like even a mild wind could encourage this entire village to slip into the sea. These days, the town has received a UNESCO recognition for being an integral component of the Geomineral Park of Sardinia. Number 7. Venice, Italy. Okay, continuing in Italy. Maybe you didn't expect to see one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world featured on this list, but despite the beauty of the city and the undeniable romance of being taxied around by singing gondoliers, Venice has got some major problems to contend with. Needless to say, the city has always been at risk of flooding due to high tides and winds causing high waters. In fact, in 2019, 90% of Venice was flooded after encountering the highest water levels in half a century. And when you consider that work on the city's floodgates, which was started in the 1980s, is still not completed, then that's more than a little worrying. But even that isn't such a big deal when you consider Venice's other big problem. It's sinking at the rate of 0.08 inches every year. Rising sea levels, coastal erosion, groundwater pumping, all of these things have had detrimental effects on the city's ability to stay above water, not to mention pollution and damage caused by large cruise ships sailing through the city, which were eventually banned in 2021. There's not a lot that you can do when your city's sinking, so in generations to come, Venice may be talked about in the same way as Atlantis is today. Number 6. Castellfollit de la Roca, Spain. The village of Castellfollit de la Roca is situated on a narrow strip of basalt rock in Catalonia, Spain, which stands at 50 meters high but only 2 houses wide. Bordered by the confluence of the Fulvia and the Toronel rivers, the basalt crag was formed due to the erosive action of the rivers on the remains of lava flows from volcanic eruptions, and the houses themselves are mostly made from volcanic rock. Castellfollit de la Roca was built in medieval times and consists of squares and dark, narrow streets, which makes sense when you consider the town's strategic location and its naturally advantageous position for defense. Castellfollit de la Roca is one of the smallest villages in Spain, but it's still inhabited by a number of very content residents, no doubt due to its blending of the old and new. For instance, not only will you find the Church of San Salvador on one side of the cliff, which dates back to the 13th century, as do many of the structures in the town itself, but you'll also find a more modern area too, featuring swimming pools and various leisure activities for the young and old alike. Even so, it's undoubtedly its precarious position and the enigma that it presents to outsiders that has made it one of the most photographed and popular sites in this region of Spain. Number 5. Santorini, Greece. Santorini is another popular holiday destination for over 500,000 tourists every year, but I wonder how many people who've booked a relaxing, all-inclusive 2-week vacation to this place are aware of its volcanic history. In 3600 BC, Santorini played host to one of the largest volcanic eruptions ever recorded. In fact, the blast was so intense with such catastrophic results that the Greek philosopher Plato is thought to have been inspired by it when he came up with his story of Atlantis. And the really scary thing? It's still active. Yeah, that's right, this thing last erupted in 1950, which isn't that recent, but still recent enough to make you think long and hard about an evacuation plan. Scientists, however, are more worried about something else which puts Santorini at serious risk: Columbo, an underwater volcano in the Aegean Sea, which had a pretty major eruption back in 1650. If an eruption of that scale happened today, then Santorini would possibly have to deal with a serious tsunami. So there you go, a couple of things to think about next time you book a vacation: death by lava or death by tsunami. Number 4. Suspended Houses of Pont-au-Royans, France. This place looks like you wouldn't be able to walk out of your front door without plummeting to your death into the waters below. But that's not an optical illusion. These are multi-story 16th century homes in the village of Pont-au-Royans, France, literally hanging over the edge of the natural Vercors cliffs. Now, any sane person would assume that the land beneath had simply eroded away, but that's not the case at all, as these homes were intentionally built to hang over this precipice to make the most of the limited space on this plateau. And you thought modern property developers were unscrupulous. Now, these days, of course, the community makes most of its money from tourism, with the houses being classified as a historic monument back in 1944. And one of the most thought-provoking things you'll see during a visit to this place is the old outhouses. These are no longer in use, of course, which is a good thing, because these toilets are simply planks of wood with a hole in them, suspended 10 meters above the river. And if that's not enough to get your bowels moving, then I don't know what is. Number 3. New Orleans, Louisiana, United States. New Orleans is known for many things: great food, great music, great people. But sadly, it's also known for the horrific Hurricane Katrina, which decimated part of the city and resulted in a great loss of life back in 2005. This was mainly due to flooding after the failure of 50 levees and flood walls along the Mississippi River, and the result was catastrophic. New Orleans, you see, is in a strange position. 50% of the city is already below sea level, and when you've got the mighty Mississippi on your doorstep, that's not the kind of thing you just ignore. Since Katrina, New Orleans has upgraded its flood control system, but there's another, more difficult problem to solve, because NASA has revealed that some parts of New Orleans are sinking by as much as 2 inches per year. With the sea levels rising and land sinking due to subsidence, there's a chance that by the year 2100, New Orleans will be between 2.5 and 4 meters below sea level. Number 2. Setenil de las Bodegas, Spain. We've already discussed a variety of strange locations for towns and cities so far, but one thing we haven't covered, because there's not really a lot of examples of places like this, is towns that have been built into massive overhanging bits of rock. Located in the province of Cadiz, Spain, and built along a narrow river gorge, many of the houses in Setenil de las Bodegas have been built into the rock walls of the gorge itself, either by enlarging natural caves or overhangs and adding an external wall. And although these overhanging rocks are no doubt great for providing shade all year round, which must be a much sought-after feature when you live somewhere like Spain, you can't help but feel you'd constantly be expecting the roof of your home to come crashing down and bring several tons of boulders with it. Strangely, however, the place seems to be extremely safe and even has a great reputation for the quality of its food, particularly its meat and pastries, with its bars and restaurants considered to be the best in the region. Number 1. Pompeii, Italy. How could we have a list involving cities built near volcanoes and not include Pompeii? Well, possibly the most famous of all devastated by natural disasters, Pompeii is an ancient city located near Naples and was buried under 13 to 20 feet of volcanic ash and pumice after the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. Since then, Pompeii has provided an eerie but fascinating snapshot of a city frozen in time at the very moment it was buried. The city itself was remarkably well preserved under the ash, but perhaps most stunning and alarming of all are the human figures frozen in their final moments of life. Pompeii was a wealthy town with luxurious houses and grand public buildings with expensive furniture, lavish decorations, and works of art, many of which have been preserved and were therefore excavated as time went on. There are even numerous examples of graffiti carved onto the walls, which give a great example of how to swear and be crude in Latin. These days, though, it is a UNESCO site, which welcomes around 2.5 million visitors every year, making it one of the most popular tourist attractions in Italy. No other city has even been put into suspended animation at the moment of its destruction by a force of nature right on its doorstep, and for that reason, Pompeii is the final entry on this list. Watch our binge-watching playlist if you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to binge.